Jamaica must stand on its own 2 feet. Nobody's coming to rescue us. Nobody's coming to give us any favors. We must do what is necessary to rescue ourselves. It is within our abilities to do it. We must recognize that you can't borrow your way to development, and neither can you tax your way to development. You have to build a strong economy and treat it like the engine of your vehicle, because it is the economy that is going to deliver the things that you need. Roads, water supply, housing, and the stipend. I keep going back to that because I need everyone here to make the link between what you desire, what you ask for, and the ability of the economy to deliver it. Because the transformation of the Jamaican from this paradoxical state of achieving quite a bit but still not achieving its true potential can only be changed into a state of realization, a state of fulfillment and manifestation of our true potential if we start to pay attention to our economy. I went into politics because I saw that Jamaicans were not prepared to make a connection between their wishes and their wherewithal. We all want these great things, but we don't want to make the connection between the things we want and what we must do. And so there needs to be a politics that helps the people of the country to understand that all the things that we're frustrated about and all the things that we want can be achieved if we build wherewithal to do it in our economy.
The international community has been run by the big powers for hundreds of years, and where are we? Where are we?
Upsetting Jamaica's powerful neighbour seems to have been a Manley speciality.
After they were elected, Manley's government began to negotiate with the bauxite companies, and after fierce resistance began to buy into the industry, mainly by compulsory purchase. 2 years later, Jamaica was paying for a 51% controlling interest, and her revenue from bauxite had gone up to $200 million a year.
That agreement creates a new and, we believe, historic partnership between the company and Jamaica.
But it makes all the sense in the world to see more productive capacity, more manufacturing, more industry relocated into our hemisphere. We certainly have the labor and the population and the desire to do so in our hemisphere. It's closer to the end markets. And so we want to pursue opportunities to make that possible. And clearly I think Jamaica is one of those places that could benefit. And the Prime Minister has that vision for the country and the creation of not just jobs, but jobs that pay even better than the jobs that maybe some could find now. So it's an opportunity I think would be mutually beneficial, and we're going to actively seek and look for ways to make that possible.
When I say Jamaica, what's the first thing that pops into your head? I bet it's Bob Marley, Usain Bolt, those incredible beaches, right? It is, no question, a global cultural superpower. But here's the thing. There's a huge paradox at the heart of this island nation, a fundamental disconnect between its world-famous brand and its very real, very persistent economic struggles. And I mean, the contrast is just so stark when you lay it all out. On one side, you've got this incredible global brand, music icons, sports legends, world-renowned products like coffee and rum. But then you look at the other side, the economic reality, a weak currency, high national debt, and a GDP that just can't seem to get going. Honestly, it feels like you're talking about two completely different countries. So that brings us to the big question for this whole explainer. Why? Why are they worlds apart? How can a country with such a massive cultural footprint have such a tiny economic one? Well, let's dive in and break it down. So the first piece of this puzzle, it isn't really about policy or politics, not at its core. It's about a simple, almost brutal mathematical reality that we're going to call the tyranny of scale. Here's the heart of the issue right here. Jamaica is fantastic at producing quality. The coffee is amazing. The rum is legendary. No one's debating that. But in the global economy, quality by itself just isn't enough. You need quantity to compete. And as a small island, Jamaica simply can't produce on a global scale. Let's just take coffee as an example. You could cover every single square inch of Jamaica in coffee plants, and it still couldn't produce more than a country like Colombia. It's not about effort. Colombia just has way more land. So while that Jamaican coffee can sell for a premium, it can never be the thing that supplies the mass global market. And you see the exact same story with another key export, bauxite. That's the ore used to make aluminum. Now imagine you're a global power like China. You need a guaranteed massive supply of bauxite for the next, say, 8 years because you're building hundreds of thousands of airplanes. Who do you sign the deal with? You sign it with the country that can guarantee that scale. You sign it with Australia. And look, this problem isn't just about commodities. In tourism, even right there in the Caribbean, places like the Dominican Republic and the Bahamas just handle way more visitors. With the legalization of marijuana, Colombia is set up to supply way more to the world than Jamaica ever could. Even in the call center business, sure, Jamaica's close to the US, which is a plus, but the Philippines and India can offer thousands more workers for a fraction of the cost. The math is just relentless. But this whole problem of scale, it isn't just some accident of geography. To really get why it's so persistent, we have to look back. We have to look at the ghost of a colonial factory that still kind of haunts the island's economy today. Let's just trace this back for a second. Starting in the 1600s, Jamaica wasn't built to be a country. It was designed to be a strategic factory on the sea for the British Empire. Its whole purpose was extraction. Then, in 1962, Jamaica gets political independence. You know, the flag, the anthem, all of it. But the underlying economic structure, those factory default settings, they were never really changed. So what are these factory settings? Well, it's an economic model that's basically hardwired to do one thing: export cheap raw materials like sugar and bauxite, and then turn around and import expensive finished goods, everything from cars to cell phones. This creates a permanent trade imbalance. The real value gets added somewhere else, and the profits flow somewhere else. There's this saying that just sums it all up perfectly. We have the brand, but we don't own the factory. And think about that for a second. Bob Marley, Marcus Garvey, they gave Jamaica this incredibly powerful cultural identity, the brand. But they weren't prime ministers, changing trade policy. So what you end up with is this world-class culture running on an economy that's still using colonial-era software. So you might be wondering, was this economic fate just inevitable for a small post-colonial island? Well, no, absolutely not. And to see a completely different path, all we have to do is look at the really powerful counterexample of Singapore. I mean, when you put them side by side like this, the story just becomes crystal clear. Both islands got their independence right around the same time, but Jamaica had natural resources. Singapore had literally none. Jamaica just kept going with its colonial strategy, while Singapore looked at its key asset, its geographic location, and decided it was going to become an essential global hub. And, well, the outcomes really speak for themselves. Singapore's success wasn't some accident. It was a disciplined 50-year strategy. And here's the real kicker. Jamaica has a similarly strategic location. It's sitting right next to the Panama Canal, one of the most important economic arteries on the entire planet, but it just hasn't had that unified long-term vision to really capitalize on it. Okay, so if the old model is broken, what could a new one even look like? Well, according to the source material we're looking at, it might take more than just a few small tweaks. It might require massive, deliberate shocks to the system, what we're calling radical economic shocks. Here are 3 pretty wild ideas that were proposed to break the cycle. First, what if Jamaica actively went out and convinced a tech billionaire to move their world headquarters there? That would force infrastructure upgrades, it would bring in tons of foreign currency, and it would create a whole new center of economic gravity. Second, create a special economic zone, but on the scale of Shanghai, a huge area with different rules, zero corporate tax, its own port, making it absolutely irresistible for global manufacturing. And third, and this is the most controversial one, a mass-skilled immigration program. The goal? To boost the population, create a larger domestic market, and force an infrastructure boom. Now, whether you think these ideas are brilliant or totally crazy, they really highlight the real challenge here. The debate isn't about Jamaica's 2 main political parties, the JLP or the PNP, because both of them are still basically operating within that old framework. The real core challenge is whether any leader can escape the short-term thinking of a 5-year election cycle to actually implement the kind of 50-year plan that transformed a place like Singapore. So this all brings us to the fundamental choice that Jamaica is facing right now. After everything we've looked at, how does a nation move forward? How does it finally turn its incredible vibes into lasting economic value? This quote, it's kind of haunting. The most loved irrelevant nation. It just perfectly captures that tragic paradox we started with. Loved for its music, its people, its spirit, but in the cold, hard math of the global economy, it risks being completely irrelevant. You know, this isn't about a lack of talent or culture or even strategic assets. It's about a system. So the question is, can Jamaica finally reboot those colonial factory settings and build an economy that's as powerful and as influential as its brand? That, right there, is the multi-billion-dollar question.
All right, let's dive right in. Today we're looking at a truly wild proposal, a geopolitical master plan that could completely flip a nation's future on its head. And the nation we're talking about is Jamaica.
This quote, it really gets to the heart of it. We're not talking about some small tweak to economic policy here. Nope, this is a complete paradigm shift. The vision? For Jamaica, to totally flip the script. To go from being a nation that borrows money to one that becomes a strategic global landlord. I mean, the big question is, how on earth is that even possible?
So to really get why a plan this radical is even being considered, you've got to understand where Jamaica is right now. See, the country has worked so hard to get its economy stable, but that very stability, well, it's created its own kind of hidden problem. Okay, so these numbers, they really tell a story. On the one hand, you see this huge success story, right? Government debt is dropping like a stone. That's fantastic. But then you look at GDP growth and foreign investment, and it's just kind of flat. This is exactly what the source material calls the stability trap. You do all this incredibly hard work to fix your finances, but then you're just stuck. You can't make that big leap to become a fully developed nation.
And then there's this number. This really brings home the kinds of deep-seated problems that just balancing the books can't fix. A high crime rate, well, that's a massive red flag for the kind of investment Jamaica needs to grow. It's this vicious cycle, you know? The social problems scare away the money that could help solve those very problems. So the question becomes, how do you break a cycle like that?
And that's where this radical proposal comes in. The whole idea is, look, instead of trying to attract investment bit by bit, what if you could just import an entire engine of development, all at once, ready to go?
And this is it. This is that engine. It's called a Special Administrative Region, or an SAR. Now let's be super clear. This is not about giving some company a tax break. We're talking about something way bigger. We're talking about leasing a huge chunk of land to another country for like 100 years. That partner country would come in, build, and run a whole city-state on Jamaican soil using its own laws. In Jamaica, it would collect the rent, so to speak, while always holding on to ultimate sovereignty. It's still their land, period.
And just so we're all on the same page, this is nothing like what Jamaica has now. Right now, they use what are called Special Economic Zones, or SEZs, but those just offer things like tax breaks, and they still operate under Jamaican law. An SAR? Man, that is a whole other level. It's a quantum leap. You're basically handing over the day-to-day running of the place. Why? To give a global partner the kind of absolute certainty and efficiency they'd need to justify investing not just millions, but, tens of billions of dollars.
Okay, I know what you're probably thinking. This sounds completely nuts, right? Has anything like this ever been done before? Well, actually, yeah. The source material points to some really fascinating precedents, not just from around the world, but from inside Jamaica itself.
Believe it or not, this idea of, let's call it shared sovereignty, it's actually baked into Jamaica's own history. Go all the way back to 1739 and the Maroon Treaties. These treaties basically recognize the Maroons as their own self-governing people with their own land. It created this state within a state. So the principle that you can negotiate and divide up sovereignty in a formal treaty, it's been done there before.
And if you want to see what this looks like on a massive scale, just look at Shenzhen. China basically created this huge autonomous economic zone with its own set of rules. And what happened? They turned a tiny fishing village of about 30,000 people into a global tech hub of more than 17 million. And they did it in just a few decades. That is the kind of explosive, game-changing potential we're talking about unlocking here.
You know, when you look at all these modern economic miracles, places like Singapore, Dubai, Shenzhen, a really clear pattern pops out. The source calls it a trinity of success. You need three things. 1, rock-solid political stability and its own special governance. 2, a great strategic location. And 3, access to just tons of cash. Now, Jamaica's got the location, that's a check. The whole point of the SAR strategy is to basically create the other two out of thin air through a partnership.
But this all leads to the one huge, critical question at the very heart of this whole thing. If you actually build this powerful new city, does it act like an engine, pulling the entire country up with it? Or does it just become this shiny, isolated bubble of wealth, an enclave that doesn't really benefit anybody else in Jamaica?
Let's talk about the upside first, because the potential rewards are just staggering. I mean, we are talking about a flood of foreign investment on a scale Jamaica has never, ever seen, enough to maybe even wipe out the entire national debt. And it's not just about the money. It's about taking a giant leap forward, a whole generation's worth of technology, infrastructure, and expertise all at once. It's like a shortcut to becoming a major industrial power.
But on the flip side, the risks are just as huge. You're talking about a real loss of direct control over your own territory. The potential for massive social division is very real, not to mention the environmental impact. But probably the biggest danger of all is creating that dual economy, this glittering bubble of wealth that just doesn't connect with or help lift up the rest of the country.
So how do you handle all those risks? Well, it really all boils down to one single thing: picking the absolute right partner. This isn't just a business deal. The source describes it as a high-stakes game of geopolitical chess, and the outcome of that game could define Jamaica's place in the world for the next century.
So, who could that partner be? Well, after looking at different countries based on their money, their expertise, and their style of governance, the analysis points to one top candidate: Japan. And it's not just because they're a tech powerhouse. The really critical piece of the puzzle is that Japan is deeply aligned with the United States, both strategically and economically. That alone would basically eliminate the single biggest geopolitical headache before you even break ground.
When you get right down to it, this is so much more than a development project. It's a complete reimagining of what the nation is. And pulling it off would require what would have to be the single most complex, most important act of statecraft in the entire history of Jamaica.
And all of this leaves us with one final, really provocative question to think about. Is this plan a strategic masterstroke, a brilliant move to lock in a prosperous future? Or is it a massive gamble that risks the very soul of the nation? The sources seem to suggest that the answer to that question, it all comes down to how it's done.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a bold new national strategy for Jamaica. We're talking about a plan so ambitious, it aims to tackle a challenge that threatens the country's entire future and, well, completely rewrite its economic story.
So let's just start with one single kind of staggering number: 85%.
That 85%, that's the share of Jamaica's university-educated workforce that has left the country. You know, we call this brain drain, but for an island nation trying to grow, it's not just a problem, it's a full-blown national crisis.
And this isn't just some abstract statistic, right? It's a reality that's holding the entire country back. I mean, think about it. When your best and brightest leave, you're left with this massive talent vacuum. And that stalls growth, and really, it limits the potential for everyone who stays. Okay, let's dig into what this crisis actually looks like on the ground. The population growth is basically zero. It's stagnating. People are leaving at one of the highest rates in the entire world. And the fertility rate? It's well below the replacement level, meaning there aren't enough children being born to sustain the population. This creates these critical shortages in really vital areas, like healthcare, where you've got just one nurse for every 1,000 people. The global average is almost 4. This is the demographic winter. This new strategy is designed to fight.
Now, this quote, wow, it reframes the problem in such a powerful way. Just think about it for a second. Jamaica invests a ton of money into educating its people, only to watch that incredible talent leave and go fuel the economies of other, more developed countries. So in effect, the Jamaican taxpayer is actually subsidizing the developed world. But, you know, to solve a problem that runs this deep, you have to understand its history. And this whole situation, it's not new. It's actually a complete reversal of a 150-year-old economic model. The proposed solution? A radical pivot away from that past.
For centuries, Jamaica's economy and its population growth were all driven by importing labor for its agricultural economy. First through the absolute brutality of the slave trade, and later on through systems of indentured servitude. But now, in the modern post-colonial era, that whole flow has just catastrophically reversed. The country's own homegrown talent is now flowing out.
So here's the proposed shift in a nutshell. It's about leaving behind a past that was built on low-wage labor for colonial powers and instead embracing a future that's built on high-value knowledge for the global digital economy. The big idea here is to create high-paying, upwardly mobile careers for Jamaicans in Jamaica.
Okay, so how do you actually build this new future?
Well, the heart of the strategy is this powerful new talent engine. It's a system designed not just to stop people from leaving, but to actually develop, retain, and then connect them to the global economy.
It's inspired by a proven global recruitment model, but it's been totally localized to serve a national purpose. And the goal is simple, but it's incredibly ambitious. Find Jamaica's high-potential talent, train it to world-class standards, and then plug it directly into the global digital economy.
And the process itself is like a complete ecosystem, designed so that no talent gets left behind. It all starts with scouting for potential absolutely everywhere, from high schools to the current workforce. Then comes this intensive training with world-class certifications from giants like Google and Microsoft. But that final step, that's the real game changer. A dedicated national placement engine that connects this newly minted talent with high-paying global jobs without them ever having to pack a suitcase.
And this is the economic endgame. It is a strategic move up the value chain. See, Jamaica is already pretty strong in business process outsourcing. BPO, think call centers. The goal is to level up to knowledge process outsourcing, or KPO, exporting high-value skills like data analytics, cybersecurity, and IT automation. It's a whole different ballgame.
So what's the potential payoff if this whole engine gets running at full capacity? Well, the projections from just a moderate 15-year scenario are, well, they're nothing short of transformative for the entire country.
First, the human impact. We're talking about a net population increase of nearly 500,000 people. That would completely reverse the country's demographic decline.
And that population growth, it would inject over $5 billion of new GDP into the local economy every single year.
And that, in turn, would generate over $860 million in new annual tax revenue for the government. And that money, that's the fuel for the next phase of this whole transformation.
And this is where things get really, really exciting. That new tax money isn't just a number on some spreadsheet. It's the funding for a complete modernization of the country's infrastructure.
I mean, we are talking about tangible, life-changing developments here. Brand new master plan communities, modern highways, a nationwide construction boom, and the digital backbone, like fiber and 5G, to support it all. This creates what they call a virtuous cycle of growth, which spurs new jobs, new businesses, and a higher quality of life for literally everyone.
But let's be clear, a vision this ambitious is never a sure thing. This is a very high-stakes national project, and it comes with some very real risks that have to be managed, and managed carefully.
And the analysis shows that the biggest threats, they aren't even economic. They're institutional. If things like government corruption, environmental protection, and social inequality aren't managed properly, this boom could very easily become a bust and end up creating even more problems than it solves.
So, ultimately, this entire thing hinges on one key ingredient: political will. The economic plan, as brilliant as it may be, can't work in a vacuum. It absolutely requires deep, difficult reforms in how the country is run, how it educates its people, and how it handles immigration. After all, you can have the most powerful engine in the world, but if the chassis is rusted out, you're not going anywhere.
And that really brings us to the final takeaway here. This isn't just some policy paper that's going to sit on a shelf. This is a crossroads. Jamaica is facing a fundamental choice between two very different futures. Either continue with the status quo of brain drain and stagnation, or choose a new path of real ambition and national renewal.
The blueprint is there, the economic potential is crystal clear, and the human capital is just waiting to be unleashed. The only question that's left is one of will and execution.
On a global scale, right, the most important thing is foreign exchange reserve. Unfortunately, that's just basically American dollars. Back in idea, before fiat currency, if you have enough resources, most of the goal are survival, I could just dig feet, become a rich country. But that doesn't exist anymore. So Jamaica is a small island. So we don't have enough land space for one. We don't have a big enough population, so we can't outcompete nobody. And then nobody now do enough favors. So we can't print way into economic success, so we can't just print money at the central bank. Our money is useless. As in India just useless because we say useless. Like, you can't go to China and pay somebody with a Jamaica $1,000 bill. That is paper, and I mean not to them. So on a global scale, that money means nothing. We say we are the best coffee in the world. We say we are the best sugar in the world. We say we are the best athletes. We are the best musician. That don't mean nothing to the world. Economic power is not the same as social power. Nobody don't care about we artists them. We think people care about them. That don't mean nothing to nobody. Um, Nobody don't care about we culture like that. We think we culture and we food amazing. Yeah, some parts of the world love that, but on a real level, that I mean, on a real level, science means it. On a real level, economic power means it. We are peon to Russia. We are peon to China. We are pawns in our global game. So we might have a one vote at UN, but I mean, no. So what that means is this, right? We produce coffee. We can never produce enough coffee physically to supply the world with island too tiny. So even if you plant enough coffee to cover the entire square mass or square meter or whatever of Jamaica, we still can produce more coffee than Colombia. We still can produce more coffee than Ghana. Ghana just have more land space. So if one supplier want chocolate, yeah, Jamaican chocolate or Jamaican cocoa might be amazing. But we can't produce the quality, we can't produce the quantity, we can't produce the standard units, X amount of kilotons, X amount of shipments, X amount of barrels of um, chocolate that is required upon a global supply chain. Sugar, same thing. Yeah, because we sugar cane factory them and we have how much sugar cane field and this is that. Go Westmoreland, you drive 20 minutes, you pass through all like cane them Westmoreland. You got Brazil, you drive for 3 days straight, you drive through sugar plantations. That's the amount of sugar cane that they have. They have so much sugar that when they have surplus sugar cane, they can make ethanol to put in our people cooking gas and ethanol to give taxi drivers free gas to power their car. You go Argentina, you drive for 5 days straight, you see cornfield. Them have so much corn that they can feed them cow corn. Just yes, them call it after that place. Australia. We have a backside mine where they are Clarendon or Mandibular, St. Elizabeth or wherever. I want like a breeze blow and we're like, oh, be a backside pollution, this and that. When Australia combined with backside, then build a whole city around the backside line. Then build train station, airport, 20,000 houses, football field, stadium, just because they know said the mine go become one entire city. Go have thousands of people at work in that mine for the next 8 years. That's the amount of backside them can produce. So what that means is me as a country, me as China, more aluminum to build planes. They go a little Jamaica and get one little bit of aluminum to build 2 plane and go sign a secure guaranteed deal with Australia. For the next 8 years, Australia supply backside to me for build aluminum planes, hundreds of thousands of planes on a conveyor belt of planes. That's what we are country against. Yeah, we have a tourism product. In our mind, we think tourism product is amazing. We're not up on the scale of Monaco. We're not up on the scale of like them rich Mediterranean type stuff. We're not up on the scale of Bali. Even within the Caribbean, um, Dominican Republic outshine we, Bahamas outshine. But we think we are the greatest tourism product. But in reality, we can't outcompete them, obviously. So now we have one major chain which is like sandals. We have to suck up to the other major chains around the world if we bring the business here. Otherwise, they're going to carry the business to Bahamas, Cayman Island, Dominican Republic, places like that. So when we are looking for anything economic on an economic level, it's not what Jamaica think or what Jamaica has. It's what Jamaica has relative to other people have. The same thing there, just more than we. So even though we might have the most amazing quality pineapple take 3 years to grow. we only have X amount of land mass to grow pineapple at Trelawney or St. Elizabeth. You go to Ghana, Ghana have one pineapple plantation bigger than Jamaica itself. The entire plantation bigger than Jamaica itself. So compare that, we can never supply that level of pineapple. The same thing with weed. We convince ourselves we like have the best marijuana in our world. Yeah, well, marijuana we might good or whatever, but we can't supply the quality or quantity when the rest of the world demand. So Colombia actually, although we know Colombia is a cocaine place, Colombia actually supply the world with more marijuana than Jamaica will ever supply the world with marijuana. So that is the next thing, like call center, right? Call centers are BPO. Yeah, Jamaica have a BPO industry where we think booming. It just booming because with the proximity to America. And some call centers rather take 1 hour flight, come here, or to a place to kind of talk English, rather than have to go 15-hour flight to India or to Philippines and have to train the people to talk English and get rid of that thick ass accents and then fix the time zone issue and then kind of get them from work. But in terms of what I'm paid, so them pay $1, $2, some cents, 30 cents, they can get 3,000 worker. Yet they have to come to Jamaica and pay $3,000 to get 500 workers, 200 workers. Then could I get more bang for them buck if they go Philippines or India. So we think we are out compete certain people. Then just choose Jamaica for convenience. So that's the reality of global economics. Our banking sector compared to like by the rest of the world. We have BS scammers and that's why I have they don't want crypto coming, they don't want their money coming, they don't want invest in a certain things out there. Because they have other places where they can go where they see it more feasible. They rather go Japan, they rather go Singapore, they rather go Luxembourg, they rather go Switzerland. Even if Jamaica do find oil, we can have a refinery out there, but we don't know tankers can dig up there. We have to go reach out to a global entity, whether America, England, or one of the Nordic countries, them and get them to dig out the oil first. So we still have to sign a deal with them. We'll probably get on like 20% of the money from the oil. Even they sign the deal now, it go look like. But is there an oil mining company out here? No. So you have to go deal with somebody on a global scale and then you have to give them benefits. So this is a 10-minute explanation, but